But I think, to whittle this down to what I felt I've seen in my travels, the toughest challenges, I would say that takes place when a pastor may get weary and just decides to hold the fort, so to speak. He doesn't want to lose anybody. It's not that he doesn't want to grow or she.
Sort of his answer to burnout in a sense.
Exactly. They just don't have the emotional or the energy, the stability to put in the work, because church growth is work. And it happens more often when a pastor is bivocational. So that is probably one of the largest challenges that I've seen. Because that's not an easy answer. It takes some discipline. It takes putting in motion strategy, order.
Yeah.
Yes. So it takes a lifestyle change. And it takes help. You can't get through this many times on your own. If you're weary, you're burned out, you really need some help. And there are certainly some avenues to walk to be better.
There's power in that relational support of a district or friends, fellow pastoral friends of other local churches. Maybe they may not even be in the same state as you, but they can provide that support and guidance and things of that nature. Anything else on churches making health a priority, as they continue to push for growth? Anything else you'd like to add to that? Maybe Sister Weber? Or?
Well, I would like to say that not every church will be a large church. And when I'm talking small, medium, large, I'm talking about the number in attendance. Okay.
Yeah.
There are some very powerful churches that are not large in number. There are communities that would not even be able to, the math doesn't equate for their church to be what we might consider the size of a large church. Right. And so I would say, even to pastors, that just like Scripture says, don't compare yourself to others. You do the best you can do with, like my husband said, vision, with that passion for the lost, desiring church growth and church health. And if that means 3 soul revival or 100 soul revival, the Bible, Paul said, we plant, somebody else waters, and God gives the increase. As long as we're doing everything we can to position ourselves and try to define or make sure that we're not doing something that is keeping us from growing. Yeah. And I know a lot of times too, I want to say this, I think we had it easy by planting a church because you can create your own culture when you plant a church. Whereas some pastors, they're fighting against a culture, like he said, that doesn't want to change, or they really don't want any new people. It's us 4 and no more, and they're fine with it. And before long, there's going to be fresh blood in there, and it's going to create a new environment and a new atmosphere, and people will eventually get with it or get out. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but
well, that's the truth. Yeah.
If not, continue to do what God has called you to do, and eventually God will bless those efforts. Just because your church is not 500 doesn't mean it's not exactly what God wanted it to be.
And I would imagine that that the Lord sends, you guys have started a church and have grown it to a very good size church in Lafayette. I would imagine that the Lord has sent you along the way people that were needed for that moment, that were needed for the living room. And some of those people in the living room didn't make it, midway through that journey or even towards the end. The Lord knows who you need at that moment and will send you those individuals, I would think, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And you've got to be sensitive enough to be okay with that and lead with an open hand, trust in God as you move through that, as trusting that the Lord is going to provide that one, but also if somebody actually leaves,
Yeah.
maybe that's the person that needed to leave so that you can continue to grow in the way that he desires for you to grow. So this is obviously a leadership podcast. So I want to specifically ask, how important do you feel leadership development is in the context of church health and growth?
Well, first, it's very important for the pastor to develop his or her leadership. I think that could go without saying. I've always said, as goes the leader, so goes the church. You can't reproduce what you aren't. Secondly, leadership training is one of the 5 growth engines which drive the growth of a church. Some time ago, there was a church growth study. They surveyed 1,000 churches, and they found that all the growing churches had 5 practices in common. One of those practices was they each had a strategy for identifying, raising up, and training leaders. Mm-hmm. So leadership development is not only personally important, but it is necessary for church growth. So thank you for what you're doing, certainly, because you're lending toward the efforts of growth. I know sometimes it seems like it's personal growth, but you can't have corporate growth without personal growth. And so it goes together. It works together.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Sister Weber, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, let me just add why leadership development is so important is because each one of us has a limit. Now, some of us, our limit is greater than others, but everyone has a limit. And so there are no Superman pastors. There's no pastor that can pastor even a medium church, a large church, or a mega church by themselves, because we all have a limit. And in fact, studies show that one of the greatest hindrances to breaking the 200 barrier is the pastor tries to keep leading as a lone ranger. And so if there's a limit to how many people a pastor can lead, then it suffices that the more leaders you have, the more people you can lead. Mm-hmm. So that means without developing leaders, your church cannot grow, because leadership, the more leaders you have, the more followers you can have. And so going back to your previous question, if there's a pastor that is feeling that hindrance, I'd start developing leaders and letting leaders start taking care of people and help with that pastoral care and help with that connecting and help teaching Bible studies and help witnessing and doing those things, because what you're doing is now you're able to lead more people because there's more leaders involved, which increases the capacity for followers. So that is definitely a church growth initiative.